Hello, everybody. My name is David Chuchuca, and I come to you guys as a photographer, but I also have a background in microbiology. This is kind of light on the theory or technical aspects. It's more of an explanation of an artistic project I've been working on. And just a quick thank you to the organizers for having me. I feel very appreciative and grateful because I moved to New York City back in March, left my PhD program back in May, and have picked up some opportunities here and there to now be lucky enough to kind of share some of these projects with you. And so just thank you. And without further ado, the first thing I'm going to talk about is facts, or rather the lack of them, and the fact that facts don't really matter all that much when it comes to presenting arguments or debates. I know it sounds kind of crazy because we're here in Mount Sinai, a research institution that's based on information that we all think is true, but as another researcher told me in a different setting, if you're explaining your research and the research isn't on your side, it doesn't really matter these days. But if the research is on your side, it also doesn't matter. What matters is more how you're presenting it, who you're presenting it to. We all hear about alternative facts and fake news. We know how easy it can be to manipulate. Even in prestigious universities, there are manipulations of data. And so what I seek to do is kind of bridge the gap between a purely knowledge-driven communication style and one that's kind of more based on empathy, more based on human connection. And so part of the reason is because there's an outside perception of academia, scientists, researchers being out of touch with the general community, not being very available. The fact is we need a lot of education to participate in the conversations that we have in settings like this that isn't afforded to a lot of people. So when it comes down to it, if we want to kind of talk and convince somebody of something, it's probably best not to start with the facts more often than not. If you're going to present a fact that contradicts what somebody already believes in their head, you're just going to, more likely than not, entrench them into their worldview as it is. So I have a hypothesis for what should probably better be titled as a strategy of increasing science engagement or scientist engagement. And if we can do this, we can allow ourselves to better relate to the public and also allow the public to better relate to us. Better inform them. Once we have them, we can better inform them on new technologies. All this increased empathy can lead to better policy decisions because if we afford ourselves as regular people who are looking out for our community, they'll be more likely to want to help us out and see what we have to say or what kind of information we're talking about. And all this hopefully will allow the general population to connect with scientists and engage and approach scientists in a way that's a little more direct and not kind of just top-down through research papers or policy decisions that are based on new research. So the primary objective of my project, Lives of the Curious, is to interview research scientists, PhD students, medical professionals, and I didn't want to limit it to any one field. That's why I've talked to people in the health sciences and the natural sciences and the social sciences, just to kind of, again, inform their perspective, let them share their story. This got cut off, but it says share their story to showcase their humanity and their relatability because, again, building that bridge of empathy and connecting with somebody on a human level before you present all these facts and figures and data, because if they don't trust you, they're not really going to listen to you anyway. So this is an exercise or an experiment in trust. That kind of sucks, but breaking down this project, there's two stories that I try and get out of every scientist that I speak with. The first story is the human story. It's the human element that makes researchers more relatable. It increases empathy with the public, and it highlights the diversity in science, which I think is also a big problem because generally speaking, people think of researchers, scientists, medical professionals as older, educated, generally white men in lab coats who are unapproachable, but that's not the case. Just a demonstration here that there's a lot of different people that are in science, a lot of different stories to tell, which will then ultimately lead them to the second story of this person as an actual scientist, as a researcher, and establishes their reputation as an expert. It explains and showcases the research that they're doing, why they're doing it, why they care, why you should care, and ultimately shares their knowledge, that communication piece, being able to kind of spread the word about the important work that's being done. A little bit about myself. I spent 2.5 years in a microbiology research lab studying biofilms in another life, although it wasn't that long ago anymore. And those are my hands. This is a photo of me in the laboratory experimenting with
the only subject I had available at the time, which was myself. I put my camera on a stool and just kind of try and play with different compositional elements. Before anybody points it out, I'll do it myself and say that, I am demonstrating good proper aseptic technique, but that beaker or the bottle of media shouldn't be on my tips. Also, my pipette is touching the top cover of my chamber slides, but that's to keep my samples clean. So I'm just experimenting and playing around. But being in the research lab afforded me certain insights. It allowed me to kind of get a sense of what the laboratory culture was like, how researchers interacted with one another, how they communicated, where they go to talk to other researchers. It also showed me the pressures that exist on scientists, on students to publish good data, to publish or perish, right? And also allowed me to see the limited engagement that there is with the community. My research lab was on my main campus, except it was divided by one small 2-lane road, and I didn't even know that research lab was part of our campus until I went over there looking for, research experience. So, and this is a fact that I talk about in my talk summary, the fact that only 30% of the American population can even point to a health research center. Mount Sinai probably being a good example of one of the few that people know. But the fact is these institutions exist throughout our communities, and we don't really know about them. But the good news is that the people inside them, it's not a lack of enthusiasm for wanting to share their research and share their stories. Rather, it's a lack of time. There's a lot of pressure to publish, to get work done, to teach students, to mentor others. So through my experience, I know people love to talk about their research. I know that it's a little harder to get them to talk about themselves, but that's part of what I'm trying to do. And the ultimate goals of this project is to position scientists as approachable experts to the community, approachable being the key word, give scientific institutions insight into the priorities and stories of the community member. This is kind of later staged, but I don't want it to just be scientists explaining their research or scientists explaining themselves. We, as scientists, researchers, medical professionals, also need to understand the needs of our community, because then that can also guide better research decisions, better community decisions. And finally, this is just my own experiment of bridging art and science, which I think everybody here can connect to. I spent most of my days in a research lab studying science and kind of left it all behind to chase this dream and take photographs of the people doing science and give them a voice and give them an opportunity to share their voice and experiment with this idea of authentic expression and what that can do to our ability to communicate facts and change people's minds and get people on our side. So finally, I was just going to give you guys a sample of what to expect, because this is also a sort of an introduction to this project. I just started publishing it online. I've been collecting stories for about a year. And really, this is an invitation for anybody here who knows of somebody who would be interested that I could speak with or would want to join me in some production capacity in growing this project. So this is a friend of mine. His name's Devin. He's a PhD student at Binghamton. And one of the things we talked about through our when we sat down was part of his life. He was saying, I don't think I'm an adult yet because I like being a kid too much, but I'm not quite a kid anymore. I'll hold on to that limbo for as long as I can. I think it's a good place to be. One thing I never want to lose, just wanted to explore. Again, just kind of getting that human element. And I don't know who here resonates with that, but I very much resonate with that. I am a kid at heart and just love exploring new things. And anybody who resonates with that might want to get in contact with Devin or just kind of just break down that barrier of this stuffy scientist who only has time for his research. Before getting into his actual research, this is him in his lab. I honestly can't remember what he's doing with those samples, but this is what he had to say about it. We essentially reconstruct wetland communities and cattle tanks behind the university. I'll let the communities do their thing in various levels of pesticide concentration and then introduce wood frog populations with different levels of tolerance to the pesticides. One thing we see a lot in ecotoxicology is that effects to one organism cascade to effects in the greater community. And what I try and get to when it comes to the research is a greater context, not just the frogs, not just the communities, but what does this mean outside of the research itself? So really quick, I just hope to inspire others to share their story, to find what they're genuinely interested in so that it can overcome their fears when it comes to communicating people and ultimately authentically express themselves and share their story with a greater community. You guys can, if you follow me on Instagram, is where the project is currently live. At Lives of the Curious, you'll find stories from NYU researcher Bianca, Mariah, these people are all in the city, Denise at Mount Sinai, and our very own Mateo, who you'll hear from later on. But so that's all for me. My name. If you have anybody that would like to participate or refer to, this is my contact information. I'd love to just talk to anybody afterwards. Thank you.